great influencer. Let's do another chapter. Just got out of the swimming pool. Got my juice. Apple cider vinegar juice. It's actually good. I should get a sponsor. I drink it that much. Okay, what are we doing? Where were we at? We were at Chapter 9. The day of the big paintball fight had arrived, and Nick found himself genuinely excited. Although he'd never gone to a paintball course, he played it in his backyard as a kid. It might have only been 2 or 3 times, but he remembered having a blast. In anticipation, Nick cooked Teddy and himself a hearty breakfast of eggs and bacon. Meanwhile, Teddy sifted through all of the paintball gear they had bought the day before, per Jason's request. The gear consisted of masks, paintball guns, paintballs, and CO2 tanks. But beyond that, they bought camouflage clothing, though how that would come into effect inside of a school, Nick didn't know. After breakfast, they gathered their gear into a black duffel bag and headed out the door to meet with everyone at Jason's. They were early, the lack of drive time being a huge contributing factor. They could have waited at home longer, but neither Nick nor Teddy could relax enough to sit still. They needed to get the adventure started. As they walked up to the house, they had to pass a full-sized party bus parked out front. Nick craned his neck to see the driver sitting behind the wheel with a newspaper spread out in front of him. He thought about waving, but the man wasn't paying attention. The front door of the house teetered open, and with only the briefest hesitation, they went inside. They found Jason in the room where the party had been held last time they were there. He sat at a bar-style table, scrolling on his phone and eating cereal. He nodded when he saw Nick and Teddy. "The article is out," he exclaimed, holding his phone out for Nick to take. "You've got to read it." Nick took the phone and observed the screen. The website was the Pacific Gazette, the same news outlet that had reported on Tom's infidelity. It was the same journalist, too, Jordan. Nick began to read. 41, 42. Okay. In the ever-changing world of social media, the overnight superstar will always find their way to the top. These people are the next generation's celebrities and historical figures. They amass wealth in incomprehensible amounts, living lavish lifestyles and influencing the masses. Arguably, the fastest growing of these at the moment is a man named Jason Cross. Jason's YouTube videos bring in millions upon millions of views, and through advertising and merchandising, those views are turned into cash. Though you'll be hard-pressed to get Jason to admit how much he makes, crunching the numbers places him somewhere in the low 6-figure range. That's monthly. With this kind of cash flow, Jason can afford any lifestyle he wants. One look at his mansion is more than enough to confirm this. However, looking at the rest of his life brings this picture into bright light. With a garage filled with exotic cars and days filled with expensive adventures, it becomes clear that Jason is not hurting for money. Just ask anyone around him, and you'll find that prosperity grows simply by being near him. In recent months, the YouTube channel Nick All The Way has gained nearly 300,000 views. Although the channel had a dedicated fan base prior, there can be no denying that its feature on Jason's channel has increased its subscriber growth tenfold. With all this wealth creating a lifestyle that people can't help but tune in to see, there is no doubt that Jason's influence is only going to grow. As his network spreads to other platforms, this growth is destined to be exponential. Jason Cross is an overnight star that isn't going away anytime soon. Prepare to know his name. Nick lowered the phone and nodded his approval. Okay, he said. That was a lot better than I was expecting. Nick didn't add that his expectation had been for an article twisting Jason and Daisy's meeting into an extramarital encounter. I know, said Jason. Although it's more of a fluff piece, Jordan's using it to open her weekly biographical on me. She says she's planning to go more in depth in future articles. This time, she didn't write anything a quick Google couldn't tell her. Oh, said Nick. Perhaps Jordan held back on slandering Jason and Daisy until a later, more juicy article. Yeah, bro, Jason continued. There's gonna be 5 articles total. That's good publicity, said Teddy. Nick wondered if his channel would receive a boost in traffic from the small mention in the article. He thought it would, the newspaper people being a completely different audience. Erickson was the third person to get to the house. He walked in dragging a roll-along cooler, the edges of which steamed with mist. What's that? Asked Teddy. The grand finale, said Erickson, rubbing the top of the cooler. Jason shot him a look, then said, It's a surprise. I want to get everyone's reaction when I reveal it. So let's keep it on the down low. Erickson, load that on the bus and cover it in a blanket. Erickson sighed, showing that he thought his time hauling the cooler was over. A moment later, he began rolling the cooler back out the front door. More people started showing up after that. Some Nick had seen before, some he hadn't. They were all carrying duffel bags, the required gear for the trip. When almost everyone was there, the cameras began rolling. With this, people started acting out, vying for the spotlight. Nick found it hard to hold a conversation with anyone with their attention on the cameras, though he understood this made him sullen. Something felt disingenuous in the way they acted. When the time came to go, the group filled the entire bus with little room to spare. Teddy snatched an open seat with Nick across the aisle from Erickson. So what's in the cooler? Teddy whispered the moment they sat down. The other passengers were so rambunctious they didn't hear or notice. No way, Erickson replied. I'm not going to be the one to ruin Jason's surprise. We already know about it, Teddy insisted. How can it be a surprise for us? I don't know, but Jason asked me not to say. It's fine, said Nick. No, Teddy whined. I think we should be in on the secret. Maybe it will help us react better. Erickson coughed. React better? I've seen your videos. You're not that good of an actor. Come on, man, said Teddy. Nick had to suppress a laugh at his friend's whiny tone. You need to relax. He's holding out on us, said Teddy. Nick couldn't understand why he was making such a big deal. Yeah, because that's the job Jason gave him. I tell you what, said Erickson. It's something very cold and very colorful. Ice cream? Asked Teddy. Erickson shrugged. That's all I'm saying. That doesn't tell me anything, Teddy complained. And yet, that's still all I'm saying. Someone near the front of the bus began singing the intro to Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen, pulling their attention. Soon another person joined in, followed by two more, and a second later, the wave of people singing made its way to the back of the bus until everyone had joined in. Different people took their best shots at the high and low notes, while behind it all, Jason filmed with his camera. By the time they finished, Teddy had given up on the secret cooler, and someone else began a new song. Thus, the bus continued down the road, a chorus of amateur singers all the way to the school. It wasn't until the bus stopped and everyone stood up that the singing finally died down. Nick could feel the strain on his throat and wondered if he would still have his voice by the end of the day. He thought he had a good shot, depending on whether or not he would be shouting in the paintball fight. The school looked large. 2 stories of light brown bricks with slanted green roofs. It had plenty of big windows that would be good for lighting. It seemed like a good place to film. Inside, the halls were spacious, and the classrooms were stocked and ready for class. Nick was busy taking the place in when Jason pulled him aside. "Have you checked your channel?" he asked. Nick shook his head. "Not since I left my house this morning." "Why?" "Because you just got past 100,000 subscribers while we were on the bus." Nick whipped out his phone and brought up the YouTube analytics. He had been anticipating crossing the 100,000 mark soon, but this was way faster than he thought. Jordan's article must have really given him a boost. "They're going to send you your plaque now," Jason went on, "and you can get verified." Verified. The word chimed in Nick's head. "I can?" Jason nodded, a big smile spreading across his face. "You made it, bro. You're about to have that stamp of approval that means you're somebody." Nick felt incredulous. He knew this had been coming and yet hadn't realized what it would mean. He pictured the blue check, the mark of the verified, that he had been next to so many celebrities, social media pages. He was going to be... I skimmed over a word. I'm going back. He knew this had been coming and yet hadn't realized what it would mean. He pictured the blue check, the mark of the verified, that he had seen next to so many celebrities' social media pages. He was going to be joining those elites. Nick felt speechless, which was good because Jason began the paintball fight. Apparently, he had divvied up the teams on some previous day and was now letting everyone know what side they would be on. He also provided red and blue vests for each team. Unfortunately, Teddy ended up on the opposite team, which left Erickson as the only teammate Nick knew. There were a couple of others he'd seen before, but not many. There were 15 people on each team, of which Nick only recognized as a guy named Mark and a girl named Jenna. Each team was designated one half of the school and given 10 minutes to position themselves and strategize. Nick stuck by Erickson, who thankfully knew a few other players on the team. "Okay," Erickson began when they had reached the far end of the building. "There are 3 main hallways in the school. If we divide up evenly down each, whoever meets the least resistance can clean up that, then flank behind the other team." "I think we should stick together," Mark said. "Use our one large force to take out their many smaller forces one at a time. I saw a video on Napoleon, and that's how he won so many battles with a smaller army." Despite this historical analogy, Nick liked the first idea better. However, he didn't know Mark and felt uncomfortable arguing. Thankfully, Erickson had no such qualms. That'll only allow them to concentrate their fire on one spot. I don't think Napoleon had to face a constant rate of fire. But we'll have the numbers, Mark countered. Until they flank us, said a girl Nick didn't recognize. The rest of the group agreed with this logic, forcing Mark to concede. This left them with nothing to do but double-check their gear until the game started. Eventually, Jason's voice crackled through the speaker. "Let the games begin," followed by the school's pre-recorded bell. Taking the northernmost hall, Nick's group consisted of 5 people he knew best. Erickson, Mark, Jenna, and another girl named Natalie. With Erickson in the lead, they began creeping their way down the hall. They stuck to the sides, 3 on the left, 2 on the right, moving from outcropping to outcropping, garbage can to garbage can. There was an extra person, not part of their team, following them with a camera, and random other camera people wandering the halls. Their goal was to capture the action from every angle. Nick's breath seemed loud in his ears, reverberating off his mask. The sound made him feel uneasy. It pinpointed the silence from everyone around him. They needed to stay quiet, lest they be found out. Mark began humming the theme to Mission Impossible, only to be shushed by the rest of them. It was too late. The sound of his humming echoed ahead of them, surely giving their position away. Within seconds of this, a paintball whizzed past Nick's head. He spotted the culprit at the other end of the hall. 3 people. Because of their masks, he couldn't identify who they were. Judging by their figures, he assumed 2 guys and a girl. Nick returned fire. The rest of his group took cover and did the same. There were paintballs flying in every direction. They splattered on the walls and floor, mostly targeted to where the people were taking cover. One of the cameramen cried out in pain. Nick watched him try to hold the camera whilst rubbing a spot on his leg that was now covered in paint. He turned back to the other team, knowing it would do no good to watch the cameraman. As he did so, a paintball zipped past his ear, striking Natalie, who was crouching behind him in the mask. She put her hands up, indicating that she was out. She then stood and retreated back down the contested hall. Nick focused on her attacker, knowing he was the actual target. His first shot went wide, but it gave him a good view of the arc his shots were taking. The second flew a lot closer, and the third found its mark. His target lifted his hands, paintball gun still in one, and retreated. There we go. Sorry, page was stuck. The other 2 opponents were simply outnumbered. They crumbled under the onslaught of paintballs showering over them. Nick did a quick count of his teammates. There were still 3 of them left: Mark, Erickson, and Jenna. "That was 3 of them," said Nick. "That means we're outnumbered in the other halls." Mark opened the top of his paintball gun and inspected how many paintballs he had left. Nick could have told him that there was plenty, but he knew it would build more confidence for Mark to check anyway. When Mark looked up, he said, "What are we waiting for?" "Let's go," said Erickson, the first to move out from cover. The nearest side hall was close, near the center of their firefight location. Erickson continued to take the lead, running in a crouch. Nick felt silly running like that, but everyone else did it, so he did too. When they reached the other end of the hall, Erickson signaled for them to stop. There were paintballs flying through the air in both directions, only a few feet in front of them. Nick could hear both teams shouting taunts as he pressed closer against the wall nearest the enemy team. "Let's hope they don't shoot us in the back," Erickson whispered. "Also the front," added Jenna. When they looked at her, she just shrugged. From what he could tell, Nick thought his side was losing. He knew if they were going to intervene, they had to do it fast. That's why he felt relieved when Erickson said, "We go on 3. 1, 2. Mark reached out and waved one hand. "Wait." "3," said Erickson, ignoring him and rolling into the hall. Nick ran behind him and could see Jenna and Mark do the same. He yelled. He didn't know why, but it felt like the right thing to do. There were 5 people on the other side, their eyes wide inside of their masks. Nick let his paintballs fly, continuing to shoot until all of their hands were up. Only when the shooting stopped did Nick realize Mark was cheering. Their 2 teammates emerged from their hiding places behind a freshly painted, colorful garbage can. "Looks like we're back up to full strength," said Nick. Erickson observed their new teammates, then said, "Let's finish this." They began their descent towards the 3rd hall. Soon after, they were running again, this time faster. They knew time was running out for any teammates that might be left down there. A paintball flew past Nick's shoulder, and he dove to avoid being hit by the ones trailing behind it. The other team, having cleared their hall, came up to meet them, both sides finding themselves with no cover. One of the new people to join Nick's squad went down immediately, lying on his stomach. Nick sighted in. There were 3 of them, all that remained of their entire team. 2 paintballs splattered on the ground around him as they focused in on his location. Nick returned fire and felt relieved to see his teammates doing the same. One by one, all of their hands went up. Nick stood and inspected himself. No paint. All around where he'd been laying, the floor was covered. "Did we just win?" asked Jenna. Nick smiled. "I think so." "I wouldn't celebrate too soon," said Erickson. He sounded forlorn, almost as though he wished they'd lost. Nick looked around at the camera people. They were still filming. He didn't understand. If the contest was over, why continue filming? Something wasn't right. "Congratulations," came Jason's voice from the speaker. They all looked up. "To seal your victory, make your way to the 2nd floor library." Erickson sighed, and it sounded almost as though he were in pain. "Let's go," he said, and began walking. Nick hadn't seen any stairs, although he hadn't been looking. Fortunately, one of the guys with the camera waved for them to follow. As it turned out, the stairs were near the back corner of the building, at the top of which they could see the glass wall that marked the front of the school's library. As they approached, the cameraman began to back away. This made Nick hesitate. Another sip. A voice crackled over the speaker. Female. "Contestants, the task before you is simple. There's a flag in the center of the library. Grab it and win." They approached the glass wall. No one sure what to make of the challenge. What the catch was going to... No one sure... They approached the glass wall. No one sure what to make of this challenge, what the catch was going to be. As they got a better angle, they spotted the flag. It sat on top of a group of desks that had been pulled together, a small stick with a white cloth on top. Standing behind the desk lurked Jason and 4 other people from the opposing team. They had their masks off, and Nick now recognized Teddy. and then he noticed mist pouring from the end of their barrels. When both sides were in full view of each other, the voice came back on the speaker. I forgot to mention, you'll need to reach the flag through the spray of frozen paintballs. If any of you can reach the flag, Jason shouted, each member of your team will be awarded $1,000. Jenna stepped into the opening of the doorway. Jenna stepped into the opening of the doorway first, and one of the four people behind Jason fired. The paintball struck her in the shoulder. Jenna made a guttural sound and fell back. She breathed in hitches, unable to catch her breath. Erickson, Mark, and Nick all eyed one another. None looked keen on running in. This is nuts, said Nick. I think I'm going to be sick, added Mark. Jenna was beginning to cry, and Erickson looked like he had already been hit. Come on in, winning team, Teddy called. The other four began to chant as well, but Nick tuned them out. Excuse me. What do we do? He asked. A frozen paintball hit the glass near to where they were huddled. A spiderweb crack burst out from the impact. Erickson dove to his stomach, and Jenna threw her hands over her head. This is not cool, said Mark. It's like rocks. Nick observed his teammates all curling in on themselves. They were scared and upset, and he didn't blame them. This was not what they had agreed on. He turned his gaze to the cracked window and the small flag beyond. In a full sprint, he might be able to reach the flag in 10 steps. Then they could be done with this. They wouldn't have to sit there in tortured anticipation. Screw this, he said, and before he knew it, he was running. He grabbed the door wall to maintain most of his speed as he turned into the library. There was a checkout desk near the door, and he grabbed a book from it as he went by, holding it out in front of himself like a shield. He felt the pain then, little explosions up and down his body. He now understood the animalistic noise Jenna had made because he now made the same one. The pain felt so intense that for a moment he wondered if they weren't using real bullets. Only his force of will kept him from collapsing, knowing that if he went down, he would have to endure pain even longer. He continued to run until his thighs hit the desk, and he went tumbling through the flag, snapping the stick in half. He held it to his chest as he came to a skidding stop. The explosions cut off immediately. He had made it. In the back of his mind, Nick could hear everybody cheering. He found it hard to concentrate on them. It felt as though he were trapped in a state of delirium. I'm in shock, he thought, and then threw up. As Nick's senses came back to him, he noticed the cheering fade into displeasure. Congratulations, he heard Jason cheer above the now hushed crowd. Jason grabbed him around his shoulders and began helping him to his feet. Nick allowed this and slowly began to rise. The initial shock of pain was beginning to subside. He could now comprehend more important injuries, like his ego after throwing up in front of everyone. As he reached his feet, Nick realized he was still on the table. They were looking down at everyone. Blue team is officially the winner, and I am going to personally give everyone on it $1,000, Jason shouted. The crowd responded with a cheer. Furthermore, that was the most epic final charge I have ever seen. There were more cheers as both teams began to get into it. I think that if you haven't gone and subscribed to Nick All The Way's YouTube channel yet, You need to do so right now. Nick wiped the back of his hand over his mouth in an attempt to make sure there wasn't anything left over. He knew this would be in the video, the finale to something epic. Leaning back to his assistant, Jason whispered, Let's start calling people to get this place cleaned up and find Nick a new shirt. And that was chapter 9. Bit of a long one. We're approaching halfway now. I'd say we're just shy of halfway. It's heating up. What's gonna happen next?